I spent 12 years building a career, helping families protect their estates from fraud. I never once thought to look at my own mother's. That's the part that keeps me up at night, even now. I'm a certified estate planning attorney. I've sat across from hundreds of grieving families and walked them through the fine print of wills, trusts, and asset transfers. I know every trick in the book, every quiet way someone can drain an estate before the ink on a death certificate is dry. And somehow, when my mother passed away 3 years ago, I handed everything over to my older sister without blinking. Her name is Roxanne. She's 7 years older than me, which means she spent 7 years being the only child, the one who could do no wrong, the one my mother called her rock. When I came along, I was an inconvenience at best. I knew this growing up. I accepted it the way you accept rain, not because you like it, but because fighting the weather is exhausting. My mother wasn't cruel. I want to be clear about that. She loved me in her way. But she also leaned on Roxanne for everything. The grocery runs, the doctor's appointments, the long phone calls that I was never part of. By the time I left for law school at 22, the dynamic was set in stone. Roxanne was the caretaker. I was the ambitious one who'd flown the nest. We'd both grown comfortable with those roles. When Mom got sick, really sick, not just the quiet diabetes we'd managed for years, but an aggressive stroke that left her unable to speak clearly or move her right side, Roxanne called me. "You need to come home," she said. "It's time." I drove 8 hours from Chicago to our hometown outside of Columbus, Ohio. I sat by Mom's hospital bed for 4 days. Roxanne was there too, organizing everything, talking to the doctors, liaising with the nursing home staff, handling the paperwork. She was efficient. She was composed. I told myself I was lucky to have her. Mom passed on a Tuesday morning in November. I held her hand. The will reading was 2 weeks later. I already knew the broad strokes. Mom had a modest estate. The house she'd lived in for 31 years, valued around $340,000 in that market. A savings account. A small investment portfolio she'd built slowly over decades, mostly index funds, nothing glamorous. She'd told me, once, years ago, that she intended to split everything equally between Roxanne and me. I'd never asked about it again. It felt morbid, and I trusted my mother. The attorney, a man I'd never met, someone Roxanne had arranged, read through the will in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. I sat with a legal pad in front of me out of habit, pen uncapped. The house went to Roxanne. The investment portfolio went to Roxanne. I received the savings account, which the attorney noted had a current balance of $11,000. I sat very still. The will also contained a line I'd never heard before. A clause stating that in exchange for Roxanne's years of dedicated caretaking and personal sacrifice, she was to receive the primary assets of the estate, with a smaller sum designated to me as acknowledgement of the distance that naturally developed in our relationship. I asked to see the document after the meeting. The attorney handed it over without expression. I read it 3 times in the parking lot, sitting in my car with the heat running. The will was dated 14 months before Mom's death, 8 months before her stroke. It had been drafted by an attorney in a suburb of Columbus I'd never heard of, not the family attorney Mom had used for decades. The signature was my mother's. But something about the spacing was wrong. It looked like the pen had stopped and started in places it shouldn't have. I drove to a CVS and bought a bottle of water and sat in the parking lot for another 20 minutes. Then I called my colleague. His name's Ray. He's a forensic document examiner I'd worked with on an estate fraud case 2 years before. Not a close friend, but someone who owed me a professional favor. "I need you to look at a signature," I said. "Send me high-res scans," he said. "I'll take a look." I didn't tell Roxanne anything. I went home to her house. I'd been staying in my old bedroom, the one with the water stain on the ceiling shaped like a swan, and I ate dinner with her and her husband and their teenage son, and I talked about nothing, the weather, a pie someone had dropped off from the neighbors, whether the nursing home had sent the final billing statement yet. Roxanne refilled my water glass twice. She smiled at me across the table. I smiled back. 3 days later, Ray called. "This is a traced signature," he said. "You can see the ink pressure is inconsistent, it's too even, almost mechanical in places. And there are 2 lift points here and here." He was looking at the scans I'd sent, where the pen left the paper mid-letter. Nobody signs their own name that way. They sign continuously. This was copied. I sat down on the edge of my hotel bed. I'd quietly moved to a Marriott in Columbus without telling Roxanne, claiming I needed to be closer to Mom's attorney for estate paperwork. "Can you put that in writing?" I said. "Give me a week," he said. I didn't have a week to sit still. I went to the county recorder's office the next morning and pulled every property record associated with my mother's address going back 5 years. What I found made my hands go cold. 14 months ago, the same month that new will was dated, my mother had signed a quitclaim deed transferring ownership of her house into a joint trust controlled by Roxanne. The signature on that document had the same inconsistencies Ray had described. And there was something else. The deed had been notarized by a woman whose name and license number, when I looked them up through the Ohio Notary database, came back as expired. Her commission had lapsed 3 years prior. A notarized document with an expired notary is not legally valid, which meant the transfer of the house was void, which meant the house still belonged to my mother's estate, which meant it should have been split equally between her 2 daughters. I went back to my hotel room and opened my laptop and started building a timeline. It's what I do. I organize facts into sequences, look for the thread that connects everything. Here's what I assembled over the following 48 hours, cross-referencing county records, bank documents that Mom's longtime accountant quietly shared with me after I called her, and the original will filed with Mom's family attorney back in 2019. The original will split everything equally. Mom had signed it with her own attorney present, witnessed by 2 people, properly notarized. It was airtight. 14 months ago, Roxanne had accompanied Mom to a notary appointment that was likely in home. Mom's mobility had been declining before the stroke. The new will was drafted by an attorney who, I discovered, had represented Roxanne's husband in a business dispute 4 years earlier. A friendly face. Someone predisposed to accommodate. The quitclaim deed was processed around the same time. Then the stroke happened. Then Mom couldn't speak clearly or write. Then she died. Then I was handed $11,000 and a clause about natural distance and sent on my way. I called my own attorney, a litigator I'd referred clients to dozens of times but never needed for myself. Her name is Ms. Wen, and she has a reputation for being the kind of calm that makes opposing counsel nervous. "Send me everything," she said after I laid it out. "How strong is this?" I asked. There was a pause. "Stronger than most cases I see. The expired notary alone voids the property transfer. The forensic analysis of the signature could establish forgery on the will. You're looking at potential charges beyond civil. This could go criminal." "I don't want to go criminal," I said, and I meant it. Not because I wanted to protect Roxanne, but because I knew the moment I said those words out loud I needed to be honest with myself about why. She was still my sister. My mother had loved her. Going criminal meant burning everything. "You might not get to choose," Miss Wen said quietly. She was right, I didn't choose. The choice got made for me. Because while I was building my timeline in a Columbus Marriott and trying to decide how much of my family I was willing to incinerate, something else was happening that I didn't know about yet. My mother's financial advisor, a woman named Ms. Okafor, who'd managed Mom's investment portfolio for 11 years and who had sent a very tasteful flower arrangement to the funeral, had noticed something in the months before Mom's death. The portfolio had been liquidated in 3 tranches over a period of 6 months. Not all at once, which would have triggered automatic review flags, but slowly, methodically. The proceeds had been transferred to an account Mom had apparently opened at a different institution, an account that Ms. Okafor had no record of ever discussing with her client. Ms. Okafor had filed a suspicious activity report with FINRA 8 weeks before Mom died. She hadn't told anyone in the family. She'd been waiting to see what unfolded. When my own attorney began making inquiries, Ms. Okafor called her directly. I found all this out on a Thursday afternoon when Ms. Wen called me and said, "Sit down." I was already sitting. I'd been sitting for days. "There's a federal angle here," she said. "Wire fraud, potentially elder financial abuse under Ohio statute. Ms. Okafor's report predates your mother's death, which means this wasn't speculation. It was document. What does that mean for us? It means we're not the only ones building a case. We just need to decide whether we want to be ahead of it or behind it." I stared at the ceiling of my hotel room. The popcorn texture had a crack, running toward the window. "What do I need to do?" I said. "Nothing yet," she said. "Keep documenting. Don't contact Roxanne. Don't give any indication that you know anything." That was the hardest part. Not the research, not the legal maneuvering. The Thanksgiving dinner I attended at Roxanne's house 3 weeks later, where I sat across from her and ate turkey and sweet potato casserole and listened to her talk about renovating the kitchen. My mother's kitchen, in the house that was supposed to be half mine, and I said nothing. I complimented the food, I helped clear the table, I drove back to Chicago the next morning. She texted me from the highway. So glad you could be here. Mom would have loved this. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and drove in silence for an hour. The civil suit was filed in February. We moved to contest the second will on grounds of undue influence and suspected forgery, to void the property transfer due to the invalid notarization, and to recover the liquidated investment assets on grounds of elder financial abuse. Miss Wen filed everything simultaneously, clean, coordinated, no advance warning. Roxanne's attorney called Miss Wen the same day. He left a voicemail that Miss Wen described to me as not his finest professional hour. Roxanne herself called me the evening after the filing. I let it go to voicemail, then she called again. Then she texted, "I cannot believe you're doing this. After everything I did for Mom, after all those years, you were never here." I read it 3 times. Then I set my phone down and made tea. She wasn't wrong that I hadn't been there, not in the way she meant. I'd been 8 hours away, building a career, sending money when I could, visiting on holidays. I carried that fact like a stone in my chest. I'd always carried it. But absence isn't a quitclaim deed. Distance isn't permission to forge a signature. The case moved faster than I expected, partly because of the pre-existing FINRA report, and partly because Roxanne's attorney made the mistake of countersuing, which only surfaced more documentation. During discovery, we obtained bank records showing that the account Mom had opened at the other institution had been accessed from Roxanne's home IP address 17 times in the 4 months before Mom's stroke, months during which my mother's mobility and eyesight had been significantly compromised. Ray's forensic analysis came back formally, 42 pages, meticulous. 3 signatures on 3 different documents, the will, the quitclaim deed, and a beneficiary change form on one of Mom's insurance policies, showed characteristic consistent with tracing from a single exemplar. His conclusion stated plainly in the report. These signatures were not made by the same hand that signed documents from 2015, 2017, and 2019 that we used as known exemplars. At a deposition in April, Roxanne's husband made a comment, an offhand remark, almost casual, that suggested he'd known about the trust account. He corrected himself immediately, but it was already in the transcript. Their attorney called Ms. Wen the following week about a settlement. I was in my office in Chicago when she called to tell me. I was eating a sandwich at my desk. I put it down. "They're proposing the house, plus 60% of the portfolio value, plus legal fees," Ms. Wen said. "What's the criminal exposure?" I asked. "Significant if the state AG's office picks it up, which, given the FINRA report and the elder abuse statute, is not unlikely. Their attorney knows that." "Tell them 75% of the portfolio," I said. "Full fair market value of the house based on current appraisal, not what it was worth 3 years ago. Legal fees, and a signed acknowledgement of the original 2019 will." The acknowledgement is unusual. I know, I wanted on record that my mother's actual wishes were different. "I'm not doing this for the money." Wen was quieted for a moment. "I'll convey that. They came back with 70%. I said yes. The settlement was finalized on a Friday in May. The house sold 4 months later. The market had been good, and the appraisal came in at $380,000. My share, minus fees, was $206,000. The portfolio recovery added another amount I won't specify here, except to say it was enough to reconsider a few things about my life that I'd been putting off. Roxanne and I have not spoken since the settlement was signed. I don't know if we ever will. That's a grief I'm still learning to carry. Not rage, not vindication, just a quiet sadness for something that was already broken before I ever looked at the paperwork. What I know is this: my mother wanted to take care of both of us. She said so in 2019 in a document witnessed and notarized and filed properly, at a time when her mind was clear and her hand was steady. Whatever came after, whatever was done in those final months when she couldn't speak for herself, that wasn't her. I think about her sometimes when I'm reviewing estate documents for clients. I'm more thorough than I used to be. I ask more questions. I look more carefully at signatures. She would have wanted me to. The Sunday after the settlement, I drove to the cemetery in Columbus. I sat by her headstone for a while without saying anything. The maples were turning. Someone nearby had left a small arrangement of yellow mums. I told her I was okay. I told her I'd found out. I told her I'd taken care of it. The way she always said I would, in the way she always believed I could, even when she never said it out loud. I drove back to Chicago with the windows down. Even though it was almost November, the cold felt clean. The road was straight and long, and I already knew where it was going.